Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Duncan, and in this video I'm going to be talking about strategies for developing large format films such as this at home. I'm going to be looking at the methods that I've been using over the years, weighing up the pros and cons of each, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about the equipment that's available for doing this, and hopefully giving you some advice to help you decide what's going to be the best method for you to develop your large format film at home. So first off, processing large format film isn't any more difficult than processing any other kind of film. The process is the same, the chemistry is the same. The difficulty is we need to get a larger piece of film into a place where we can develop it effectively in the dark. Now, using traditional developing tanks such as these ones from Patterson, we can actually load the films up in the dark and process in the daylight, hence the term daylight developing tank. But they only really accommodate 35mm, 127 and 120 film sizes. They don't by default allow you to process large format. Another consideration here is that when we're working with large format, a big advantage is the ability to process each negative separately. Now, as you may or may not be aware, it is possible, particularly with black and white negatives, to manipulate the tonal range by varying the development and the exposure index of the film. So if we have a scene which is really high brightness range, we can moderate the contrast, bring the contrast back under control, as it were, by reducing the development time. Or if we have a scene which is very low contrast, we might be able to perk it up a bit by increasing the development time. What we're talking about here basically is the zone system. Now, if we're working with a large format film, what we can do is develop each individual negative according to the lighting conditions, according to the brightness range in the scene, and according to our own particular interpretation of that scene. What we can do is we can apply that zone system very precisely. This is something which is nigh on impossible to do with roll films. So the first technique up for discussion is tray processing. Now, I'm going to suggest that this is possibly the cheapest way to get into home development of your large format film. Essentially, all you need is a few of these trays. You do, of course, need a dark room or a dark space in which to work, but it needs to be 100% light tight. Any stray light at all getting into the space where you're developing can have a detrimental effect on your process. Now, I've used this method for many years and I've found it to be highly successful. It gives me the distinct advantage that I can develop individual sheets of film according to the conditions under which they were taken. The brightness range, the film stock, the developer I want to use. I can do this on a shot by shot basis. And this is really useful, particularly with monochrome. You can develop more than one sheet at once by stacking the negatives in the tray. So you might have several negatives in one tray, and then in the solution you would rotate them like so. But I don't do that because I find that there's a strong risk that you're going to scratch those films, especially if you're using some of the more modern, perhaps more budget emulsions, which tend to have a softer emulsion surface. So I don't do that. So to use trays, essentially all you need is 4, you might even get away with 3 trays. I personally use 6 typically. The first one would be a pre-soak. The second ones would be developing trays. I would use 2 of those in tandem. I'd then use a stop bath, and then I'd have 2 fixing trays. And the reason I have 2 trays here is so that I can actually process 2 bits of film at once, although I stagger them. So I take my first piece of film, put it into the pre-soak, leave it in there for a minute. I would then move that along to the developer, put it in one of the developer trays, take the second piece of film at the same time, put that into the pre-soak. And then after another minute, I'll take it out of the pre-soak and put it into the other development tray. And that way I can stagger the process so that at no point do I end up with 2 bits of film in the same tray, and therefore I'm not risking any scratching, but at the same time I'm able to speed up my processing session. I can develop 2 pieces of film at once. Been doing this for years, works perfectly. Now, there is a big problem here. Not only do we need a dark room, but because we have to work in total darkness, how on earth do we work out what the timings are? How do we monitor the development time? We can't use a timer that lights up like your phone or something like that, because again, that risks fogging the film. Many years ago, I made myself an audio track, a timing track as an MP3, and I loaded it onto a iPod Shuffle, which when you switch it on doesn't light up, and I use that audio track to monitor and control my development working in total darkness. Worked really, really well. The only problem is after 3 or 4 sessions of developing in sequence, the audio track is a bit tedious and it does kind of get you a bit. Tray processing then is effective, it's very flexible, and it's very economical. It's also, for most of us, pretty awkward. And to be honest, most of us don't have a dark room or a suitable dark space in our homes. Before I go on to talk about some of the other methods though, I'd like to point out that this video is entirely independent. I'm not being sponsored in any way whatsoever. When I go on to recommend particular brands or particular products in the next sections, I'm doing so based on my own opinions and my own experience. If you'd like to see me make more videos in this way in the future, please subscribe to the channel, please share and like the video. Strategy number 2 then is to use a modified roll film developing tank. Now there are lots of solutions out there. The one I have is this, the Mod 54. This is a molded plastic insert designed to fit into a Patterson developing tank. Specifically this size of tank, the one that would normally take 2 120 spirals or 3 35mm. I've got the older style Patterson System 4 as opposed to the Super System 4, but it works perfectly well with either system. What is important though is whichever tank you're using, make sure you use the center column. Mount the mod onto the center column, because if you forget to put that in, the tank won't be light tight and your films will be ruined. I also recommend that you use this spring collar that comes with the tank to hold the insert down on the column. Otherwise it might ride up as you're agitating the tank, particularly if you're using inversion agitation, and the top edge of the film might not actually develop. Okay? It will take up to 6 sheets of film loaded simply by flexing and dropping into these slots. With a little bit of practice, this is very easy to load and very quick to load. These kinds of inserts work really well. I've used the Mod 54 on a number of occasions and I've got excellent results. However, I have identified a couple of limitations, particularly for my own workflow. One is that in order to use it, I've got to use a litre of developer. Now that's a litre whether I'm processing 6 sheets of film or I'm just processing 1. Consequently, unless I've got 6 sheets to process, if I'm using, as most of us do, a one-shot developer, I am wasting a lot of chemistry in order to process just 1 or 2 sheets of film. And so I've either got to wait until I've got lots of sheets of film of the same development time, same type to process together, or I'm going to have to work in a way which is much less economical. Second issue I've got is a much smaller one and really not that big a deal. One of my favourite film stocks is this. This is Rolly RPX 25. And if you've used this, you'll know this has a very, very thin film base. In fact, this stuff is so flimsy that if I put it in the Mod 54 and then agitate the tank, particularly by inversion, the chances are that film is going to come out of the tracks and it's going to become loose in the developing tank. Now, other solutions might handle that much better than this particular one, I don't know, but I'm certainly not going to risk developing my RPX in this particular adaptation. You might also consider the taco method, and this is where we take a piece of exposed film and we curl it emulsion side inwards, curl it up like a taco and put an elastic band around it. We can then insert it into a standard Patterson style developing tank like so, We must use the column once again. We can get 3, possibly 4 pieces of film inside the tank. Put the lid on and then we can process. Now, I've never actually used this method, but I know a lot of people do, and it seems to work very well for them. It does use quite a lot of chemistry though. The third strategy that I wanted to talk about is using a dedicated large format developing tank. Now, there are a number of different designs out there, some of which I think are better than others. For example, I used to have a Yankee tank. Now, this was designed to take up to 12 sheets of 5x4 inch film in a single process, but I never had 12 sheets of film to process at once. It also took a huge amount of chemistry, and it was not very efficient when it came to agitation. It also took an age to pour the chemicals in and out of the tank, so I abandoned that one a long time ago. What might be a better solution today would be something like the Stearman 4x5. This comes in 2 versions, the compact 445 designed to develop up to 4 sheets at once, or the Max 645 designed, surprisingly, to develop 6 sheets of film at a time. Both of these use a minimal amount of chemistry, and they've been exceptionally well received within the large format community. However, I don't have one of those. I have a different Stearman developing tank. I have this, the 8x10, and I really like this. This is my favoured method of developing large format film now. It's essentially like having a developing tray, but with a light tight lid. And this gives me all the advantages I used to get from my tray development, that being I can develop in small numbers, I can develop with a minimum amount of chemistry, but with none of the disadvantages. I can work in daylight, which is great. It's designed to either process up to 4 sheets of 4x5 or 2 sheets of 5x7, or if you remove the dividers, a single sheet of 8x10. It also has a spout at one end, which enables you to pour the chemicals in quickly and efficiently, and the whole thing is kept light tight by these light baffles. I really like this, but there are a couple of things I should make you aware of. Firstly, it seems really expensive, particularly here in the UK. There are alternatives, maybe something like a Patterson orbital processor, but to be honest, they're getting difficult to find and they're getting more and more expensive. You may end up having to pay as much for that as you do for the Stearman. The second limitation of this kind of tank is you can't do stand processing. So if you're a stand processor, this is not for you. Other solutions that I haven't talked about include things like developing tubes or something like the Jobo system. The Jobo system is particularly good, very, very efficient on chemistry, and very good if you want to develop colour film because it comes with its own temperature controlled water bath. However, be prepared to spend big if you want to buy a Jobo processor now. Final recommendations then? Well, if you're shooting in 4x5 and you're shooting to a budget, I would suggest that the insert solutions such as the Mod 54 or similar would be a very good choice. Of course, you could always just try the taco method and see how you get on. If you've got a little bit more to spend, then you should definitely check out the Stearman 4x5 tanks. They should definitely be on your radar. If, like me though, you're moving up to larger formats and you're processing across a number of different sizes, then the Stearman 8x10 has got to be an excellent choice. For my money, this is the best solution. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video.